chapters 4 and 5. Chapter 4 is what the author titled Confounding and Compounding, and chapter 5 is Getting Wealthy and Staying Wealthy. So in chapter 4, the Confounding and Compounding, the author really goes into the power of compounding money, compounding interest, compounding returns, and he uses a really interesting example about the power of compounding. So the planet Earth has experienced 5 ice ages, at least that we know at this point right now. And the way that ice ages form is it just very gradually over millennia happens with respect to the lowering temperature on the planet. And it all has to do with cooler and cooler summers. So globally, as summers are cooler and not all of the snow melts, the more snow that stays on the ground, snow reflects solar energy. When that solar energy reflects back into space, it gradually lowers the temperature of the planet. This could be unnoticed for centuries. And then after it hits a fulcrum point, the temperatures start to drop dramatically, ice caps expand, and the planet enters into an ice age. The flip side to that coin is the 180-degree opposite. Summers are warmer, less snow, more solar radiation is absorbed by the planet, and over millennium, that temperature starts to increase until it hits that fulcrum point. Then the polar caps melt and the planet is out of an ice age. The same thing happens with money. Money grows by compounding, and you're not going to see much of a difference on $100, $1,000, or maybe even $10,000. But once you start getting north in the 6 figures of 100,000 or more, the compounding effect is much more noticeable with respect to larger dollar figures. And in fact, the author actually highlights Warren Buffett's progression. So I think by any yardstick, Warren Buffett can be considered probably the most successful investor in human history. But 96% of Warren Buffett's net worth wasn't achieved until after his 65th birthday. And it had to do with the fact that it just took that long for that compounding to be able to take place. He was very successful early on, but he's had over 80 years of investing successfully. There have been other investors that have performed better than Warren Buffett have, but they haven't been at it as long as he has. There have been some other hedge fund managers that did very, very successfully, far better than Warren had ever done in his portfolio, but they didn't do it long enough. And so he highlights the differences in just the ability for money to compound over multiple decades. So the confounding part of it is that for most people, they just don't have the patience to see that compounding effect take place. And as you're heading toward retirement in the early stages of your saving career, you're not going to see much. It's not going to really do much. You open up your 401k balance and it'll seem like it's hardly moved at all. But as you get in with it within that retirement red zone of 5 to maybe 10 years away from retirement, a 1 to 2 percentage point movement in your nest egg, like say your 401k or retirement accounts, is probably going to eclipse anything that you can put into that account. And that's where the returns of your retirement nest egg become much more important than what you're actually able to contribute. So chapter just really goes over the power of that compounding aspect. Chapter 5 is Getting Wealthy and Staying Wealthy. This is 2 very different skill sets, and it's very applicable and highly relevant to people who are looking to retire, if not have been retired for a while already. So when you're working and saving, you're looking to grow your wealth. You're looking to increase that, progress your career, earn more money, save more of those earnings, and get that retirement nest egg as high as it possibly can be. The author uses a couple of really good examples of some very successful investors over history. In fact, he highlights a trader in the late 19th and early 20th century. In fact, this investor was lucky enough to be able to kind of short the market on the market crash of 1929, made himself a fortune in doing that. But he was kind of bit by the hubris bug, and he figured he could do that again and again and again. Well, some years later, he borrowed a lot of money, made some very risky bets, lost everything, ended up taking his own life. So I think the author used that example to show that that individual was very, very good and very, very skilled at building huge amounts of wealth, but not skilled at being able to keep it. And so when you're looking to retire, you have to be very skilled at both aspects of that. Make sure that's moving in the right direction to get that number as high as it can be to support your lifestyle, Once you hit that and you move into retirement, it's all about preservation and turning that into income. So two different skill sets, opposite spectrum of one another. Recognize those two things and get into a mindset that can help you kind of transition through that phase. So in this chapter, the author actually uses three, what he calls survival mindsets. So people who have been good at both building and maintaining wealth, they do three things. First, they make sure that they're financially unbreakable. And what that really means is he describes being able to build in margin of safety aspects to their overall wealth, making sure that they understand, you understand, or any investor understands that most of what happens in the markets is not controllable by any of us. Recognizing the randomness and the lack of control, it really is important to be able to say, remove as much of that as you possibly can. So if you're looking to retire and your plan dictates that you're getting double-digit returns every single year leading up to and through retirement, you're not adding enough of a margin of safety to your plan. A lot of that is out of your control. The higher that return needs to be to keep you kind of within your comfort zone, the more there's an margin for error and also margin for some type of situation to go wrong. Great financial crisis, technology bubble bursting, COVID, and whatever else the future holds. If you're too dependent on these returns, you're going to run yourself into some rocks as the markets decline, and it has nothing to do with the control that you have over that account. So making sure that you have high margins of safety and be financially unbreakable, number one. Number two, plan to plan that the plan will not go according to plan. And what that means is, and to borrow a phrase from Dwight Eisenhower, is that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. And so usually the first contact that any plan has with real life, it changes dramatically. It's the exercise of being able to really ascertain the variables, the circumstances, and the changing needs and wants, especially when it comes to wealth and retirement planning. So when it comes to retirement planning, one of the sayings in retirement planning is that we're going to use imperfect and incomplete information today to make decisions about an unknowable future. That's pretty much financial planning summed to its least common denominator. So in that case, make sure that you have a plan, that you're dynamic enough in that plan, and you're building in those margin of safety items that you did in item number one. Item number three is making sure that you kind of have a barbelled personality. And what the author is saying is that being optimistic about the future, but paranoid about whatever will knock you off your perch. It's always kind of looking over your shoulder. And he makes a really good and shares a really good example of a very successful hedge fund manager that, when asked, how is it that you've been successful for as long as you have been? His response was, we're always looking for what's new. We're never looking at what we did in the past as the way forward. We know and recognize that things change constantly. So we're always looking for new advantages as they present themselves, as new information becomes present. And that's really important because there's been over 2,000 books written about Warren Buffett and his investment style and how it is that he's built the fortune that he has. But those circumstances will never exist again. That happened, during his journey, during his investment time horizon, and he made those choices based on information and circumstances that were happening at that time. Just like he's making decisions and information about what to do with Berkshire Hathaway now. So understanding that, having a plan, having a method, staying true to that is very important, but also making sure that you're constantly looking over your shoulder to say, all right, what's going to change? How do I adapt to that new change? And how is it that I need to be able to kind of recognize what's most relevant for me? And that's the trickiest part about everything, because in today's world where there's just so much information broadcast to us all of the time, it's hard to know what's truly relevant. But then it comes back to making sure that you have a plan and making sure that you're planning to say that that plan is going to change as time goes on, and always looking to introduce more variables with respect to margins of safety to make sure that you're financially unbreakable.